I just finished up judging for the WSMA student composition competition. Mostly I was judging high school students, and it was really fun and so exciting to see all these pieces. I was incredibly impressed with the amount of creativity and especially sort of detail that a lot of students put into their pieces. So thank you to all you students, if any of you see this, for your work. It was really cool. But there were a couple things that stood out to me in almost all the pieces, and I wanted to address them because taking them together, I think they show a deeper underlying concept that I didn't have time to elaborate on in the evaluations, but I wanted to talk about for a minute. So the issues had to do with metronome markings and pedaling markings. And basically what I saw was most pieces started with a metronome marking as a tempo indication, and a lot of pieces had very specific pedaling markings throughout. Now, neither of these things are found in much piano literature at a more advanced level. You find them in pedagogical pieces, and sometimes editors will add pedal markings or in parentheses a metronome marking. But the reason why these aren't added is actually significant. So I'll talk about metronome markings first. Usually, when you have a tempo in mind for a piece, it's because that speed makes the piece feel the way you want it to. It's not so much a matter of will the piece be done in 3 minutes and 2 seconds or 3 minutes and 17 seconds, as it is a matter of will the piece feel fast or comfortable to listen to, or will the listener be just agonizingly waiting for the next note because it's so slow. Those are the kind of things you're thinking about when you're thinking about tempo. But those feelings depend on a lot more than the metronome marking. If we play the notes softer or louder, that's going to affect the feeling of speed, as well as how much the notes vary. How much rubato we use really affects how driven the piece feels. And then the sound of the piano itself, the room we're in, maybe even our mood or what pieces we play before or after it, or who our audience is. Those can all affect the choice of tempo in subtle ways. But the feeling is what you want to stay consistent. So it actually is a lot more informative to the performer to use words. You can use the traditional Italian words of adagio and moderato and allegro and stuff. Or you can use English words and say rapidly but controlled, or slowly flowing, or glacial, or any of those words give emotional connotations that will help guide the performer to make a choice. So you need to treat the performer as an autonomous artist who will interpret and judge and they will figure out the best way to render your piece in the given situation. A metronome marking doesn't tell me what your emotional goal with the tempo is. So that's the distinction there. Oh, and by the way, if you have one of those metronomes that has tempo markings, like the Italian words along with the approximate ranges in metronome markings, it's kind of nonsense because it depends on so many other variables. I mean, the things I talked about, as well as just the simple matter of how is it notated? Is it 4/4? Is it cut time? Is it mainly 8th notes or mainly 16th notes? Makes a big difference. So again, usually, probably, emotional words are more specific. And then if you want to, put a metronome marking in parentheses to give people a starting point. That would be awesome. Now the other thing is pedal markings. And similarly, pedaling is incredibly sophisticated. It can be incredibly sophisticated and is a lot more than just, is the pedal up, is it down? How slow do I move it down? Do I half pedal? Do I flutter pedal? How do I time it with regard to the impact of when I hit the keys with my fingers versus the foot? So pedal marking is more specific, or pedaling is more specific than the pedal markings we put in. So normally, if you look at a lot of romantic piano literature or more contemporary stuff, or older stuff obviously because they just didn't use much pedal, but you won't usually find pedal markings throughout. Some composers, like Chopin, does actually use quite a bit of pedal markings sometimes, if I remember correctly. and those aren't just editorial. So you will see those, but again, the artist will need to take into account other aspects of their interpretation and how those are going to affect the sound, as well as the room you're in is a huge variable for pedaling, and the piano you're playing on. If you're playing on a concert ground in a really, like, let's take the extreme of a cathedral, you'll almost never pedal. You'll also need to play pieces slower. But anyway, going on a tangent there. So pedal markings, again, quite variable. So it's not usually that useful to have those pedal markings written in. I'll almost never, even if they're written in, I almost never am going to execute them exactly how they're written in. So generally I just start ignoring them if they're in the whole piece. However, sometimes you do want something pedaled in a really specific, unique, maybe weird, just a novel way, a specific musical effect. And in that case, you probably do want to write the pedal marking in. So my advice is, don't use it except for those places to make sure the performer notices those are important. Those are the ones where you mean something specific. And when it's just generic pedaling with when the chord changes or when the texture muddies up, basically that's when you lift the pedal, keep the melody and counterpoint from being blurred. That's standard stuff. Performers are going to do that automatically anyway. So I would generally reduce that. But again, so the overarching theme here, I think, is to think through the performer, and I love giving them enough information, but also to realize what decisions they will need to be making based on their interpretation and stuff, and to give them that freedom too, and not overburden them with sort of specifics that might not work very well in their scenario. They're small details, but I thought it would be interesting to talk about, so maybe that was useful to somebody out there. Bye.